Hi everyone, my name is Tran, and today I am going to present our work, measuring compliance with the California Consumer Privacy Act over space and time. Every day, we spend hours browsing on the internet. This also means that websites and apps are collecting vast amounts of our personal data, including our identifier information, browsing history, opinions, and preferences. Often, the data collected does not just stay within the website, but can get shared or sold to third parties to generate more profit for these businesses. And this gives rise to many potential harms to consumers, including targeted advertising, consumer profiling, manipulation and influence, data breaches, and identity theft. The California Consumer Privacy Act, or CCPA for short, was introduced in 2018. The goal of the act is to give Californian consumers more control over their personal information. The act went into effect in January 2020, consists of 6 important privacy rights, including the right to opt out of sale of personal information. The California Privacy Rights Act, or CPRA for short, aims to strengthen the CCPAs. It went into effect in January 2023. The CPRA made several amendments to the CCPA. This includes, it extends the right to opt out to include not just the sale, but also the sharing of personal information. It also revised the criteria of who is subjected to CCPA. It also differentiates sensitive personal information as a separate category of the general personal information. In terms of the opt-out methods, the old CCPA requires firms to offer a do not sell my personal information link in their websites. However, this is no longer acceptable by the CCPA. Instead, firms have these 3 options to implement the opt-out methods. They can either implement the do not sell or share my personal information link located at the top or bottom of their websites. They can also provide an alternative opt-out link such as privacy choices with the opt-out icon next to it. In this study, we are going to use the term opt-out link to refer to both the do not sell or share my personal information and privacy choices link. And this is also the focus of this study. Lastly, websites can also choose to respect opt-out preference signals. However, they have to mention in the privacy policies that they respect opt-out preference signals. We are really interested to know whether the privacy laws have any effect on the behaviors of the websites. As such, we come up with these 4 research questions. First, how does the implementation of CCPA's opt-out requirements change over time? Next, are websites complying with the CCPA's opt-out requirements? Next, do the businesses that implement opt-out link for the sale and sharing of personal data also let non-Californian consumers opt out? Last but not least, do businesses that fail to provide opt-out links on their homepage offer other opt-out methods, or are they not subject to CCPA? Due to the interest of time, we will not cover research question 2 in this talk. So, to answer these research questions, this is the outline for today's talk. We will first cover dataset and vantage point selection, followed by methodology, findings, and lastly, limitations. We choose to conduct our measurement from 5 states. Virginia, Colorado, and Utah are the states that also have their privacy laws resembling that of CCPA. These states have their privacy laws went into effect at different timings and also have some differences between them. Illinois does not have any state-specific privacy laws, therefore, it is used as a contrast vantage point for us to see the spillover effect of CCPAs on those that do not have privacy laws. We conduct our measurement on 1,016 unique websites from the start of January 2023 to the end of July 2023. For each state, We measure twice per month. Now let's move on to our methodology. Before conducting our measurement, we first come up with a list of keywords to identify the opt-out link. Luckily, the CCPA has spelled out the magic keywords to identify the opt-out link, such as privacy choices or do not sell or share my personal information. We also do a manual check on the website to see whether these keywords are sufficient and add on several keywords that are not included in the CCPA. Next, for each website, we first render them using Selenium. Next, we use two approaches to search for the opt-out links. We first search in the page source to see whether there are any elements such as an anchor, a button, or a span that contain the keywords that we are looking for. We also search directly on the website using the search bar. We then compare the keywords obtained from these two approaches together, and if they disagree, we will manually check. Now let's move on to our findings. For the first research question, how does the implementation of CCPA's opt-out requirements change over time? We plot the graph of the number of websites that implement the opt-out link by each measurement date. We see that the number of websites implement the opt-out link increase over time, and this increase is slightly steeper around January 2023 compared to other months. We also see that there are a decrease in the number of websites that use outdated wording, do not sell my personal information, and an increase in the number of websites that use CCPA's compliant wording such as privacy choices or do not sell or share my personal information. Overall, we see that websites are increasingly but not fully complying with CCPA's requirements yet. For the next research question, do the businesses that implement opt-out link for sale and sharing of personal data also let non-Californian consumer opt out? We also plot a similar graph for these 5 states. We found that across these 5 states, the number of websites implementing the opt-out link increased over time. California is always a leader in terms of the number of websites with the opt-out link, followed by Virginia, although the gap between Virginia and Colorado and California start to close up around April 2023. Interestingly, we also found that Illinois used to slightly lead Utah and Colorado, especially in the beginning months of 2023. However, as we move closer to May and June 2023, Colorado now took the lead among these 3 states, followed by Utah and finally Illinois. We look at these websites further, and we found out that 78% of websites that implement the opt-out link in California also implement that across all of these examined states. Now let's move on to our last research question. Do businesses that fail to provide opt-out links on their homepage offer other opt-out methods, or are they not subject to CCPAs? Let's first go to the question of who is subject to CCPA. Firms subject to CCPA are those for-profit entities that collect consumers' personal data, which does business in California and satisfy at least one of the following thresholds. First, has annual gross revenues exceeding $25 million. Second, possess personal information of at least 100,000 Californian consumers. And lastly, derive at least 50% of their annual revenue from selling consumers' personal data. As you might have guessed, information such as the number of Californian consumers or how much revenue are derived from selling consumer personal data are often not readily available. As such, we try our best to use other information such as whether the business is for-profit or not, where are the headquarters located, and also their annual gross revenue to categorize these websites into whether they are subject to the CCPA. Interestingly, we found that There are a significant number of websites that still implement the opt-out link, although they might not be subject to the CCPA. This includes nonprofit websites and for-profit websites whose revenue is less than $25 million. On the flip side, we saw that 30% of websites that are likely subject to CCPA still do not implement the opt-out link. And we are really interested to see what can be the reasons for this potential non-compliance. We have looked closely at their privacy policies, and here is what we found. 43 websites claim that they do not sell consumers' personal information. Note that this might exclude them from the old CCPA, but might not exclude them from the CPRA because the CPRA requires them to not just sell, but also not share consumers' personal data. Next, 41 websites doesn't mention about CCPAs or opt-out rights at all. In addition, 37 websites have their opt-out methods mentioned in their privacy policies, and these opt-out methods might or might not be deemed as acceptable by the CCPAs. For example, they can embed the opt-out forms in the privacy policies or require consumers to give them a phone call or email to communicate about their opt-out rights. So overall, we see that the reasons for the failure to comply to the CCPAs are varied and ambiguous and requires more attention. We acknowledge that our study might suffer from several limitations. For example, the presence of the opt-out link doesn't mean that it is functional or compliant to the CCPA. In addition, the presence of the opt-out link at a non-California vantage point does not mean that non-Californian consumers can exercise the opt-out rights. So in summary, our studies shed light on the following research questions. We found out that websites are increasingly but not fully complying with the CCPA's requirements yet. We also found that the majority of websites that implement opt-out link in California also implement across all the examined states. We also found 30% of websites that are likely subject to CCPAs still do not implement the opt-out link, and the reason for these failures can be varied and ambiguous. Thank you so much for your attention, and if you have any questions, please contact me at tranv@uchicago.edu.